What if the life you keep dreaming about is actually waiting for you right now, and the only thing standing between you and that life is one decision you have been refusing to make? Not a decision about money, not a decision about luck, or not a decision about opportunity, a decision about discipline. Because here is a truth that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You do not need a better situation. You need a better standard. You do not need more time. You need more discipline. And once you understand this, once you truly accept it, your entire life begins to change. So stay with me for the next hour, because what you are about to hear could be the turning point you have been waiting for. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Say that to yourself again. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Everyone has goals. Everyone has dreams. Everyone wants a better body, a better income, a better relationship, a better future. But wanting is cheap. Wanting costs nothing. Anyone can want. The real question is not what do you want? The real question is, what are you willing to do consistently, quietly, without applause, without recognition, in order to get it? Because success is never given. Success is earned in the small, unseen hours when no one is watching and nothing seems to be happening. Think about your life right now, honestly, without excuses. Are you the person you want to be? Are your habits building the future you dream about, or are they slowly stealing it from you? Most people never ask themselves this question, and that is exactly why most people never change. They drift through years the way a boat drifts without a rudder, letting the current of convenience decide where they end up. And then one day they wake up and wonder how they got so far from where they wanted to be. The answer is simple, even if it is uncomfortable to hear. They were not steering, they were floating. And floating never leads anywhere on purpose. Here is something you must understand deeply. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is not restriction. Discipline is not the enemy of freedom. Discipline is the price of freedom. The disciplined person is the only person who is truly free, because they are not controlled by impulse, mood, or convenience. Everyone else is a servant to whatever feeling shows up first in the morning. If they feel motivated, they work. If they feel tired, they quit. If they feel distracted, they wander. But the disciplined mind does not ask permission from feelings. The disciplined mind acts regardless of how it feels, because it has already decided in advance what must be done. Now let us talk about the root of most failure, and it is not what people assume. Most people believe failure comes from a lack of knowledge. They believe if they just read one more book, took one more course, learned one more strategy, everything would finally click into place. But that is rarely the real problem. The real problem is not a lack of knowledge. The real problem is a lack of application. Most people already know what they should be doing. They know they should wake up earlier. They know they should eat better. They know they should stop wasting hours scrolling through other people's lives while their own life sits untouched. They know. But knowing and doing are two completely different countries, and very few people ever make the journey between them. Why does this happen? Because doing requires discomfort, and the human mind is wired to avoid discomfort at almost any cost. Comfort feels safe. Comfort feels good. Comfort whispers softly and convincingly, telling you that rest is more important than growth, that tomorrow is a better day to start than today, that you have earned the right to relax before you have even built anything worth resting from. And here is the danger. Comfort does not announce itself as your enemy. It disguises itself as kindness. It disguises itself as self-care. It disguises itself as practicality. But make no mistake, unchecked comfort is one of the most destructive forces in a human life, because it slowly, quietly convinces you to accept less than what you are capable of. Let me ask you something important. How many dreams have died, not in a single dramatic failure, but in 1,000 quiet mornings where the alarm went off and the decision was made to sleep another 20 minutes instead of getting up to work on the vision? How many businesses were never built, not because the idea was bad, but because the discipline to execute it consistently was missing? How many relationships fell apart, not because love disappeared, but because the daily discipline required to nurture something valuable was replaced with laziness and neglect? Discipline is not just the difference between success and failure in your career. It is the invisible force shaping every single area of your life, whether you realize it or not. Understand this clearly. Motivation is unreliable. Motivation is a mood, and moods change with the weather, with your sleep, with your stress, with a single negative comment from someone you respect. If you build your life around motivation, you will build a life that collapses the moment motivation disappears. And motivation always disappears eventually. That is simply how emotion works. It rises and then it falls. But discipline does not rise and fall with your emotions. Discipline is a decision made once and then defended every single day. This is the fundamental difference between people who achieve extraordinary things and people who remain stuck talking about what they wish they had done. The achievers made the decision once and then they simply refused to renegotiate it every morning based on how they felt. Now here is something that will change how you see your entire future. Your life today is the sum of every small decision you have made up until this point. Every skipped workout, every book you never finished, every opportunity you let slip because you were too afraid or too comfortable to take action. Every hour you spent scrolling instead of building. Every excuse you accepted as truth. Your current results are not random. They are the direct output of your habits, repeated so many times that they have quietly become your identity. This should not discourage you. This should empower you, because if your habits created your current results, then new habits practiced with discipline can create an entirely new future. You must accept full responsibility for your life, starting today. Not tomorrow, not next Monday, not after the next holiday, today. This is uncomfortable to hear because blame feels easier than responsibility. It is easier to say the economy is bad, the timing is wrong, other people had more advantages, life was unfair to me. And maybe some of that is even true, but truth and usefulness are not the same thing. You can be right about the unfairness of your circumstances and still remain stuck for the rest of your life if you keep waiting for circumstances to change before you do. Responsibility says something very different. Responsibility says, regardless of what happened to me, I am the one who decides what happens next. That single shift in thinking is the beginning of every meaningful transformation. Let us talk now about what discipline actually looks like in daily life, because many people confuse discipline with intensity, and that is a mistake that destroys momentum quickly. Discipline is not about extreme, unsustainable bursts of effort followed by total collapse. Discipline is about small, consistent, almost boring actions repeated daily until they compound into something extraordinary. The person who reads 10 pages every single day will read more books in a year than the person who occasionally reads for 3 hours and then stops for a month. The person who saves a small amount consistently will build more wealth over time than the person who tries to make one big risky move to catch up all at once. Consistency beats intensity every single time over a long enough period. This is why your morning matters so much. Not because mornings are magical, but because the way you begin your day sets the tone for how you treat yourself the rest of the day. If you start your day by giving in to comfort, snoozing the alarm, avoiding the hard task, delaying the workout, you are sending yourself a message before you even realize it. The message is this: when things are difficult, I give in. And that message follows you into every decision you make for the rest of the day. But if you start your day by doing the hard thing first, even something small, you send yourself a completely different message. The message becomes, I do what needs to be done, regardless of how I feel. That message changes everything, because now you are someone who follows through, and that identity begins to shape every choice that follows. Understand something crucial about excuses, because excuses are the quiet architects of a wasted life. Excuses are rarely dramatic. They rarely announce themselves loudly. They whisper. They sound reasonable. They sound responsible even. I am too tired today. I will start next week when things calm down. I just need a little more time to prepare. I will do it after this one last distraction. Each excuse on its own seems harmless, almost forgivable. But excuses are never isolated events. They are patterns. And patterns repeated over months and years become the architecture of an entire life. The tragedy is not that people fail dramatically. The tragedy is that most people fail slowly, quietly, one skipped commitment at a time, until one day they look up and realize an entire decade disappeared while they were waiting for the right moment that never came. Here is a hard truth that will set you free if you accept it. There is no perfect moment. There is no ideal time when everything will finally be convenient enough to start. The conditions will never be perfect. There will always be a reason to wait. There will always be uncertainty, risk, fear, and inconvenience. Successful people are not those who wait for these obstacles to disappear. Successful people are those who act in the presence of fear, inconvenience, and uncertainty, because they understand that action creates clarity, while waiting only creates more waiting. Discipline is not the absence of doubt. Discipline is moving forward despite the doubt, because you have decided the goal matters more than the discomfort of pursuing it. Now let us talk about focus, because focus is where discipline becomes visible in daily behavior. In this current world, distraction is not occasional, it is constant. Every screen, every notification, every piece of content is competing for your attention, and most of it is designed specifically to capture your attention and never give it back. This means that focus is no longer just a personal trait. It is now a competitive advantage. The person who can protect their attention, direct it intentionally toward what actually matters, and resist the pull of constant stimulation will accomplish more in one focused hour than most people accomplish in an entire distracted day. Your attention is one of the most valuable resources you own, and every day you decide, consciously or unconsciously, where that resource goes. Ask yourself honestly, what is currently stealing your focus? Is it endless scrolling that gives the illusion of relaxation but leaves you feeling more drained afterward? Is it constant comparison with other people's curated highlight reels, which quietly convinces you that your own effort is not good enough, when in reality you are only seeing a fraction of someone else's story? Is it the fear of doing deep, uncomfortable work, so you fill your day with shallow, easy tasks that feel productive but actually accomplish very little? Whatever it is, name it honestly, because you cannot discipline what you refuse to acknowledge. Awareness always comes before change. You cannot fix a leak you pretend does not exist. Self-mastery begins with brutal honesty about where your time and energy actually go, not where you wish they went. Most people dramatically overestimate their effort and dramatically underestimate their distraction. They believe they work hard, when in reality they work in short, interrupted bursts, surrounded by hours of low-value activity. This is not a moral failure. It is simply the natural result of an environment engineered to fragment attention. But understanding this gives you power, because once you see clearly how your day is actually being spent, you can begin making intentional decisions instead of unconscious ones. Discipline is simply the practice of choosing intentionally again and again instead of drifting automatically. Let us now talk about identity, because this is where lasting change actually takes root. Most people try to change their life by focusing only on outcomes. I want to lose weight. I want to earn more money. I want to build a successful business. These are fine goals, but outcome-focused thinking rarely produces lasting change, because outcomes are distant and abstract, while comfort is immediate and real. What actually creates lasting transformation is identity-focused thinking. Instead of only saying, I want to lose weight, a person begins saying, I am someone who trains consistently regardless of outcome. Instead of only saying, I want to build wealth, a person begins saying, I am someone who manages money responsibly and invests in their future every single month. When discipline becomes tied to identity rather than just outcome, it becomes far more resilient, because now every disciplined action reinforces who you believe yourself to be, and every act of avoidance feels like a betrayal of that identity. This is exactly why small, consistent actions matter so much more than people realize. Every time you follow through on a small commitment to yourself, you are not just completing a task, you are casting a vote for the type of person you are becoming. Every time you break a small commitment to yourself, you are casting a vote for the opposite. Over months and years, these votes accumulate into a clear identity, either someone who follows through or someone who does not. And here is the deeper truth. People do not fail to achieve big goals because the goals were too difficult. They fail because they never built the identity capable of sustaining the daily discipline required to reach them. Build the identity first through small, consistent proof, and the big results will eventually follow as a natural consequence. Now think carefully about your daily system, because your results are never really about your goals, they're about your systems. A goal is simply a direction you would like to travel. A system is the daily structure that actually moves you there. Most people spend enormous energy setting ambitious goals and almost no energy designing the daily system required to reach them. This is backwards. If your daily system is weak, no amount of goal setting will save you, because you will simply fall back to the level of your current habits the moment motivation fades. But if your daily system is strong, built on discipline rather than emotion, you will continue moving forward even on days when you do not feel like it. And those difficult days, ironically, are often the days that build the most character and the most long-term progress. Consider the discipline required in something as simple as your physical health. It is not complicated in theory. Eat with intention. Move your body regularly. Sleep enough to actually recover. None of this requires special knowledge most people do not already possess. Yet very few people actually maintain these basics consistently, not because it is intellectually difficult, but because it requires daily discipline in moments when comfort screams louder than commitment. The extra food when you are not truly hungry. The workout skipped because you are tired, even though tired is often exactly when movement helps most. The late night spent on a screen instead of asleep, quietly stealing tomorrow's energy tonight. Every one of these moments is small, but small moments repeated for years become either a strong, capable body or a tired, depleted one. There is no neutral outcome. You are always building one or the other. The same principle governs your finances, whether you want it to or not. Financial discipline is rarely about dramatic moves. It is about the boring, repeated decisions made consistently over years. Spending less than you earn. Saving before you spend rather than after. Investing in your own skills and knowledge instead of only in temporary pleasures. None of this feels exciting in the moment. And that is exactly why so many people avoid it, chasing instead the excitement of instant gratification, only to find themselves years later in the exact same financial position, wondering where the years went. Discipline in this area does not promise excitement. It promises freedom eventually. For those willing to endure the unglamorous middle years where nothing seems to be happening, even though everything is being built quietly beneath the surface. And what about your mind itself, the very instrument you use to make every decision in your life? Most people spend more time maintaining their car than they spend maintaining their own thinking. They fill their minds carelessly with whatever content happens to be convenient, whatever opinions happen to be loudest, whatever emotions happen to be strongest in the moment, without ever asking whether these inputs are actually building the kind of mind capable of achieving the life they claim to want. Discipline of the mind means being intentional about what you allow in. It means challenging negative self-talk instead of accepting it as fact. It means feeding yourself with ideas, knowledge, and perspectives that expand your capability, rather than content that simply passes the time while quietly shrinking your ambition. Here is something you must never forget. Your environment is either working for you or against you. There is no neutral environment. If you surround yourself with people who make excuses, complain constantly, and settle for mediocrity, you will find it extraordinarily difficult to maintain high personal standards, because human beings are deeply influenced by the standards of the people closest to them. This does not mean you abandon everyone who is struggling. It means you become intentional about who you allow to influence your thinking, your habits, and your standards for what is acceptable. Discipline is far easier to maintain when your environment supports it, and far harder to maintain when your environment quietly undermines it every single day. Let us return now to the subject of failure, because failure is often misunderstood in a way that keeps people stuck. Failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is part of the process of success, almost always. The people who eventually achieve extraordinary things are not people who avoided failure. They are people who failed repeatedly and refused to let failure become the final chapter of their story. Discipline is what allows a person to fail, learn, adjust, and continue, instead of failing once and using that failure as permission to quit permanently. The undisciplined mind treats failure as proof that the goal was never possible. The disciplined mind treats failure as feedback, simply information about what needs to change, nothing more, nothing less, and nothing personal. Think about how differently your life would feel if you removed the emotional weight from failure and simply treated it as data. Imagine trying something, having it not work, and instead of collapsing into self-pity or abandoning the goal entirely, you simply ask, what does this teach me, and what will I adjust moving forward? This is not about suppressing emotion or pretending setbacks do not hurt. It is about refusing to let temporary emotional pain make permanent decisions about your future. Discipline means separating how you feel in this moment from what you know is true about your long-term direction and choosing to act according to your direction rather than your temporary emotional weather. Now let us talk honestly about time, because time is the one resource that never returns once it is spent. You cannot save time the way you save money. You cannot borrow more time the way you might borrow money. Every single person, regardless of wealth, talent, or background, receives exactly the same 24 hours each day. The difference between people who build extraordinary lives and people who remain stuck is almost never about how much time they have. It is about how disciplined they are in how they use it. Every hour you spend on distraction is an hour permanently removed from the pursuit of your goals. Now, this is not meant to create guilt. It is meant to create awareness, because awareness of how valuable your time actually is often becomes the exact motivation needed to guard it more carefully. Consider this question seriously. If someone examined your calendar for the last 30 days without you explaining anything, what would they conclude your priorities actually are, based purely on how you spent your hours? Would your calendar reflect the goals you claim to care about, or would it reveal a gap between what you say matters and what you actually give your time to? This is often uncomfortable to examine honestly, because most people discover a significant gap between their stated priorities and their actual daily behavior. But this discomfort is valuable because it points precisely to where discipline needs to be applied most urgently. Let us also address the subject of patience, because discipline without patience often collapses before results appear. Almost everything valuable in life takes longer to build than we initially expect, and almost every worthwhile pursuit includes a long, unglamorous middle period where effort is being invested, but results are not yet visible. This middle period is exactly where most people quit, not because their approach was wrong, but because they expected visible results sooner than reality allows. The people who eventually break through are not necessarily more talented than everyone else. They are simply more willing to continue showing up during the invisible middle, when there is no proof yet that the effort is working, and no guarantee that it ever will. This is why discipline must be paired with a long-term perspective. If you only measure your progress day by day, you will become discouraged constantly, because meaningful change rarely shows dramatic daily proof. But if you measure your progress across months and years, the pattern becomes undeniable. The person who trains consistently for 2 years looks entirely different from the person who trained for 2 weeks and quit. The person who studies their craft consistently for 5 years possesses a completely different level of skill than the person who studied intensely for 1 month and abandoned it. Discipline compounds slowly, almost invisibly, until suddenly the results become impossible to ignore, both for you and for everyone watching from the outside. Now, let us speak about comfort one more time, because comfort deserves to be understood as clearly as possible. Comfort itself is not evil. Rest is necessary. Recovery is necessary. But comfort becomes dangerous the moment it stops being a temporary rest and becomes a permanent home. The problem is never enjoying comfort occasionally. The problem is building an entire life around avoiding anything that requires effort, growth, or temporary discomfort. Everything worthwhile on the other side of your current life exists on the other side of some discomfort you have been avoiding. The workout you dread often builds the body you want. The difficult conversation you avoid often builds the relationship you want. The uncomfortable financial discipline you resist often builds the freedom you want. Discomfort, chosen intentionally and consistently, is the price of every meaningful transformation, and there has never been a way around paying it. Let me ask you something directly. What have you been avoiding specifically because it feels uncomfortable, even though some part of you already knows it is exactly what needs to happen next? Maybe it is a conversation. Maybe it is a habit you know you need to build. Maybe it is a fear you need to face directly instead of continuing to walk around it. Whatever it is, understand this clearly. Avoiding it does not make it disappear. It only delays the moment you will eventually have to face it, usually under more difficult circumstances than if you had faced it earlier on your own terms, with discipline rather than desperation. Now, let us talk about consistency one final time, because consistency is truly the foundation everything else in this message rests upon. It is tempting to believe that success requires some rare, spectacular talent that most people simply do not possess. But when you study people who have built extraordinary lives closely, a different pattern emerges almost every single time. They were consistent when consistency was boring. They were consistent when no one was watching. They were consistent when there was no proof yet that their effort would ever pay off. Consistency, more than talent, more than intelligence, more than opportunity, is the quiet force behind almost every extraordinary achievement in human history. And consistency is available to absolutely everyone, regardless of background, regardless of resources, regardless of where you are starting from today. You do not need to be extraordinary to begin. You simply need to be willing. Willing to show up on the days you do not feel like it. Willing to do the work quietly without needing recognition. Willing to trust the process even during the long stretch where nothing seems to be visibly changing. Are willing to reject the excuse in the exact moment it appears instead of negotiating with it. This willingness, practiced daily, eventually becomes discipline. And discipline, practiced daily over months and years, eventually becomes destiny. This is not magic. It is mathematics. Small, consistent inputs, repeated over a long enough period of time, always produce significant outputs, whether the domain is fitness, finance, relationships, skill, or character. So here's what I want you to take from everything you have just heard. Your life is not being shaped by one massive decision waiting somewhere in your future. It is being shaped right now, today, by the small decisions you make in ordinary, unremarkable moments. The decision to get up when the alarm goes off. The decision to do the difficult task before the easy one. The decision to protect your attention instead of surrendering it. The decision to keep a promise you made to yourself, even when no one else would ever know if you broke it. These small moments, repeated with discipline, are quietly building the entire architecture of your future, whether you are paying attention to them or not. You have everything you need to begin right now, exactly where you are. You do not need permission. You do not need perfect circumstances. You do not need to wait until you feel ready, because readiness is not a feeling that arrives before action. It is a strength that is built through action. Discipline yourself today in the small, unglamorous moments that no one else will ever see, and you will discover that you are capable of achieving things you once believed were reserved for other people, luckier people, more talented people. You were never missing talent or luck. You were only missing the decision to discipline yourself consistently enough for long enough to become the person capable of achieving what you have always wanted. So ask yourself, honestly, right now, before this moment passes and comfort quietly convinces you to forget everything you just heard. What is the one discipline you have been avoiding? The one small daily action that you already know deep down would change everything if you simply committed to it without excuses. Decide right now that today is different, not because today feels special, but because you have chosen to make it special through discipline. Master your mind, master your habits, and you will inevitably master your future. The life you want is not waiting somewhere far away for the right circumstances. It is waiting on the other side of the discipline you choose to practice starting today. Discipline yourself, and there is nothing you cannot eventually achieve.